Hello and a very warm welcome to Personal Finance. I'm Gugulethu Cele. Well, today on the show, we're going to find out how easily you can switch your banking accounts and how best to find a model and method that actually works for you. Joining us in studio to tell us more about this is Andrew Bladon, who's the head of growth at transactional banking at FNB. Thank you so much for joining us today, Andrew.
Thanks very much for having me, Gugu.
Let's talk about this switching a bank account. I think opening up a bank account is an effort already to start off with, but for many consumers out there who might want to switch bank accounts, let's perhaps start off with that reason. What would be the reasons which would make someone want to switch their bank accounts?
Well, the trend of switching bank accounts has started to change over the years because it's starting to become a little more easier, should I rather say. The most common reason why customers would switch bank accounts is there are various reasons based on the income of the customer. A lot of the reasons that we see is either dissatisfaction with service. Cost is a massive factor, particularly in the current economic environment.
True.
And then also the portfolio that the customer has. So as their banking needs change, particularly as their income grows, you'll see higher demand for a bigger variety of banking options, and often customers change banks as a result of that.
Walk us through that, because so often we like to carry the flashy gold cards or platinum cards around because of the status we believe that it gives you. But how critical is it to look at the package and service offering that you're getting from a particular account?
Well, status is a massive factor actually when it comes to switching bank accounts. Looking at the value proposition is critical, because that gives you a holistic understanding and view of your needs, both present as well as future, because switching isn't as easy as we as banks would like it to be, because of some of the operational complexity that sits in the background.
Run us through that. How does it impact us as a client?
So some of the operational complexity, the complexity is actually around the changing of your existing debit orders, payments, and even your salary, and that's because of the way payments transactions work in the background in the financial institutions. So the principle of what's referred to as a mag tape, and that's basically, in the case of a payroll, when the payroll's loaded and the instructions given to the bank to switch the payroll. And often the payroll cutoff isn't at month end. So, you know, if you're getting paid on the 25th, on average, your payroll cutoff will probably be around the 12th.
Sure.
So there's a huge timing factor that comes into play when you choose to switch bank accounts on the transactional side.
I'm glad you mentioned the issue of timing, because that's quite critical, as you say, when it comes to switching bank accounts. So what kind of leeway should we be looking at here?
Okay, so there's never a perfect time to switch bank accounts. It's around how you manage it and how the financial institutions that you deal with in terms of debit orders, or the financial institution that you're moving to manages it on your behalf. So generally the timing for a mag tape cutoff is around the 12th. So anything after the 12th, you know you're going to be delayed by at least a further 15 days in terms of switching all of those debit orders and payment details across.
Sure.
So that's a big factor to consider.
And that raises a critical element that you've also alluded to, which is ensuring that you balance, or rather have sufficient balance in both accounts, the old one that you're looking to close down, as well as the new one. How do we handle that particular issue too?
So I mean, the biggest thing is, whilst switching bank accounts, there will be a period, and generally it's around 45 days, that you'll be running two bank accounts. And the way that you manage it is how you enter that switching process. So institutions like FNB offers a full switching service where you can log all of that information in terms of your debit orders that are required to move, your payment details, as well as your salary information. Now, critical to that is making sure that you're accurate, because an error on that side of things just delays the transaction even further. So then you're going to fall outside of your 45-day window period.
So it could take even longer.
Well, if you get the information wrong at the point of initiation, yes, it could take longer, because of course, you know, what the bank will do is they'll communicate with your vendor or provider. They will then validate that information supplied. If that information is incorrect, then the bank has to go back to you as a client, get new information. So that, you know, it becomes a bit arduous.
Exactly. And with my old bank account, again, how do you manage the needs there with making sure that there's enough money there, perhaps if a debit order still goes off? Yeah,
so in most instances, what you'll either do is you'll leave all of your debit orders behind and move your salary across, and then start the debit order switching process, because at least you know where the credit balance will sit, and then you can manage that bank account, usually via online or digital banking, to make sure what debit orders are scheduled when to run and whether they do or don't run. So in the case of FNB, part of the service is every single day you'll get a status update around where the debit orders are that you've asked to have moved.
Having said this, I understand timing is quite critical. Then how long should I wait for before closing my old account and then strictly monitoring my new account that I've opened up with whichever financial institution?
So look, the majority of the banks now actually offer switching functionality, and what happens is once they've completed that process, they'll notify you to say, all right, it's safe now to close your old bank account.
Fantastic. At least that makes things a lot more easier. But are there any hidden costs? Because as you've alluded to, that's the one thing us as consumers tend to hate. Hidden costs that might creep in when it comes to debit switching or new authorizations that need to be given for the new banking account that you seek to open.
No, so look, I mean, all institutions in the country, switching is a free service that they add. I mean, it's part of the onboarding, so there should be no surprises from that perspective. The most important thing is to make sure that you have sufficient funds in the account where the debit order will run, because the risk, if there aren't any funds, you could incur unpaid fees, because obviously the institution will load that debit order, run it against the account, and there'll be insufficient funds in the account.
Again, having represented a financial institution yourself, I take it you're quite cautious with regard to fraudulent activity here. How do you avoid Google, for instance, who has a bad rep with one bank and wants to move on to another bank and tries to hide away certain discrepancies about it?
Look, Gugu, that's a difficult one, because actually you can't really manage it on the client side. I can tell you, and it's a known fact in the industry, rogue debit orders or unauthorized debit orders is a massive challenge. And a lot of work's going into sorting that problem out in terms of identifying those debit orders and stopping them. So, F&B, for example, has just launched a new functionality in that regard. We'll notify you on debit orders that have been loaded before they run, and then you can validate whether you want to accept that debit order or not. If you want to stop a debit order, you can log on to any of those digital platforms and stop it there and then, so that it doesn't run off the account. That's the one side. In terms of Gugu as a bit of a rogue or running away from her creditors, unfortunately, that's just one of the challenges that exists.
Gosh, well, at least you are helping put the power back again within the consumer's hands to be aware and fully understanding the conditions within which they operate. But if we also take a look, I'm taking advantage of the fact here that you are head of growth here regarding transactional banking. When it comes to our needs, is it often advisable to change your bank account as often as you feel and wish?
I would strongly encourage it. It's your needs change. Make sure that the institution that you're with can cater for those needs, because otherwise you end up finding yourself pigeonholed in terms of when you want to do an important transaction. So a classic example, you want to buy a vehicle or you want to buy a new home. Now, if your institution can't assist you, because you'll always get a better interest rate where your primary bank account is.
True.
And that's why, because the bank knows you. So they know whether you are a bit shady or not.
Let's hope not in my case.
So,
I'd like to believe I've got a solid record. But to close off with, before we do come to our notes to self section, what about changing bank accounts, but perhaps in the case of married couples who want to open up a joint account, is that something that might be possible at all? Yeah,
joint accounts are very possible. I mean, obviously there's a whole side of legalities that, I think the couple must definitely pay attention to. Specifically in the event of a death or a split, because it freezes the account. So customers must be cognizant of that. But all of the banks will offer joint accounts, and just the implication of that is both partners have to be signatories on the account. So when you're moving the debit orders, both of them will have to sign in terms of permission to move those debit orders.
So I can't hide the fact that I have a secret shoe account from my husband, and I'm joking, on a lighter note.
You can.
Can we?
You can open a bank account on your own. I mean, it depends how you're married to your husband, though, but let's not get into that technical detail now.
Exactly. Well, Andrew, we've certainly said quite a bit, but let's turn our attention now on some of the key takeaway points from tonight's discussion. Andrew, before getting myself into trouble with my husband on a particular fetish for shoes, let's touch on the key takeaway points that viewers need to go away with when it comes to the importance and various elements in understanding when it comes to switching your bank account.
So the first thing is, before you switch, understand what your needs are and make sure the institution that you're switching to can cater for those needs. Then, once entering the switching process, make sure that you pay attention to the detail. The admin is very important. So the information you disclose is critical. And then also make sure that you manage the funds between the two accounts so that you have the right amount of money in the right bank account to honour the debit orders that are still in transit in terms of switching. I think those are probably the three most important factors.
Just something that I think we might have forgotten is that if things do go wrong somewhere along the line, I take it constant communication with the bank that you're moving to is imperative.
Yes, so it's less about you communicating with the bank, it's more about the bank that's owning that process for you communicating with you. If it's a good service, they will be very proactive and on top of it.
So maybe worry a bit if they are not keeping you up to date.
Yeah, if you're getting that infamous dead air, I would check.
Then
There's
time to
nothing
make
wrong with
another
that.
switch again.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's all about service.
Precisely. All about service and putting customers at the center of it all. Thank you so much for your time today, Andrew. Great sharing insights with regard to what to keep in mind when it comes to wanting to switch your bank account. A big thank you once more to Andrew Bladon, who's the head of growth for transactional banking at FNB. Well, do be sure to keep in touch with us, and you can constantly communicate with us and share your feedback with us. Hopefully all the good news and experiences that you've had when it's come to switching your bank account. Tweet at your comments and feedback to @CNBC Africa using the hashtag Finance410 or to myself at Gugulethu on Twitter. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.